Ready? Okay, so this is the blocking net, and I decided just to do a single layer on this block here. And as you can see, it's got a slightly square, a domed shape, and I've cut the edge. Now the decisions I made when I cut the edge were that when I put it on my head, it cleared my ears, it came up to the top of my forehead, and it came down fairly low on the back of my head. So I could cut that line any way I like. I can cut it up and around the face, down in front of the ears, up around the ears, and then around the bump at the back of the head. And if you've got one that's an anatomical head shape, you can really, keep working with that. So it's your call, whatever shape you make that. And also, you just need to know, you've got to think about how it's going to sit on your head. When I wired it, I wired into the net as close as I could to the edge of the net, and I just did that overlap at the back. Now then, when I put it on my head, I wanted it to sit a bit loose, because I'm going to put a binding, and then I'm going to put another binding, and then I'm going to put the head fit in. So if all of those layers might end up being a little bit too tight. So you start off with it a bit loose, and the stretcher's over there, and I used the stretcher to open it up a bit, and now that's ready to go.
When you cut your wire, did you cut it to your head fit plus blah?
Thank you. Okay. Plus the 3-finger overlap.
So what extra ease did you allow on the head fit?
Not a lot, just a loose fit.
Okay.
So it's sitting quite loosely. I can fit my finger in there if that's useful, but I didn't have a particular measurement in mind, not necessary for this, but it just needs to fit loosely on your head. By the way, when I blocked this, I blocked it with a little water and then with the sprayer so that it wasn't super sticky. And then when I'd finished blocking it, I put a nice generous coat of 100% stiffener on that. I found some soft interlining, and it's fusible, but I'm not going to use it as fusible. And I'm going to use this as my first row of binding. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pin that over the join, and then just slightly firm and stretched, not too tight, it's basically the Goldilocks and the Three Bears degree of tightness. So not too tight, not too loose. So I'm just gently stretching that over there. And already when you put that on your head, it's starting to feel softer. So that goes like that. Now, can someone kindly tell me what sort of stitch should I use to sew this on?
Open back stitch.
Well done, you. And just with a matching colour. Now, over here, if I wanted to get extra height out of my turban, I always like to think of it as a little chimney. And I can put a little height extender, and I've just made this out of a bit of the blocking net, and I've cut tabs, and I can pop it on here. So, and you can play around with your material to decide whether or not you want to use it. I would put a little short wire around the top, and I would bind that as well, but not with this stuff, just with the actual coloured fabric, because it's really for looks, not for touch. So you can just pin that on and try that on in front of the mirror. Now this little chimney has not been stiffened, and it's still quite soft. Once I've established how I want it to sit, I would put stiffener on that as well. So we'll set that aside for a moment.
A chimney is the standard?
No.
No. Oh.
Use it if you want it.
Right.
So if you want to get extra height, it's hard to get it without putting something in that forms a substrate.
Right, okay.
So that's what they're for.
Yep.
And if you go looking in that inspo page, Some of them sit quite snug on the head, and some of them do get a bit of a height about them. Now I want to show you the fabric that I've prepared. I've started preparing. This is the fabric I'm going to use. It's a cotton and silk blend, and I've got a tulle which is a lightweight tulle. And the way that you can establish whether you think it's going to do a good enough job is do a little test like that. So that way you can decide how it's going to behave. If you test it with, if I wanted to, I could use organza underneath, another layer of the same stuff because I've got miles of it, or I could do it with nothing. And if it's with nothing, the draping tends to be finer, like yours is, Renee. So it's really, again, getting to know your interlinings and what the interlinings can do, because that gives you a real sense of control about that. Now, this is just a little bit of predictive text. We'll get back into this later. But what I would do for the draping of this is I would start by bunching it up like this and laying it across the back of my turban. I've cut about a 12-inch piece, and if I just lay that across here, if I start pinning at the centre back, and then I can start laying the draping over the shape as tight or as loose as I want it to be to make it look like it's sitting naturally. And I'll keep on going around. I'm going to work from the bottom, and at some stage I'm going to start at the top and work downwards as well. And then I can meet in the middle, and I can just tuck one layer over the other so it looks crazily natural, and it looks like it's being tied with one piece of fabric and it's completely natural. But the reality is we're busy hacking away anything that creates too much bulk, and we're draping it, and when we're stitching it and pinning it, if there's hills where it ridges and valleys, where are we going to put our pins and our stitches?
In the valleys.
In the valley, correct, yes. So the pinning should be in the low part where it's contacting the hat, and the stitching should be down there as well. Now, before I start draping, I'm going to cover this with a light, loose layer of my tulle, and that's just going to give me a little bit more air around the hat, but I'm not going to make you sit and watch me do all that. So what you need to do is, with your mirror, you need to work out how and where you want to cut. You've got your centre front mark in there so you know where it's going to sit, and you just need to decide how it feels comfortable, where you want your line to be. Then you wire it with your overlap at the back, check the size, and if you haven't got a stretcher, you can just gently stretch it like that and just open up the join at the back and just open the whole thing up by hand, because not everybody has a hat stretcher in their cupboard, only the lucky ones. After you've done that, you can attach your binding using an open back stitch. This is a preliminary bind, and I've established that I'm just going to do a single layer of this, and because I'm using black underneath, it's going to conceal that, and I'm going to put those stitches up fairly high. So I'm going to use a fairly wide bit, and then later when I do my head fit, I'm going to stitch it in just above the headline, above where the wire is, and I'm going to put my drape so it comes down and, you know, covers the raw bit, so it just looks nice and natural and neat. So that's kind of the prediction. This is the first step, and we'll move on and do the rest subsequently. Thank you.
Question.
Yes, question.
That's how many meter?
That is actually
length,
12. Yeah, that is actually 12 inches wide.
Yeah.
And you can establish how wide you think you need to have it because what happens is it starts off this wide and then it gets thinner and thinner. So if you're draping something this wide, and this bit's got to go wider than that, eventually there's a limit to that curl, and then you've got to find places for those drapes to disappear to. So when it's more curving, you might make it narrower. I'm starting at 12 inches, but the next piece I cut, I might start to find it's awkward, and then I might go to 8 inches. And that might curve more easily for me. And so, so you decide very much based on the nature of your fabric and how well it's going. The other thing, just to give you another prediction, when you're draping your turban, sometimes you can lay it down, you can pin it, you can blah, 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 blah. You want it to look really natural. Sometimes it just will fight you and fight you. If it does, you do it and you pin it as far as you can go before you start wanting to throw things. Then you go, thank you, little Miss Hat, and you go away and you get on with your day and go to bed, and then in the next day or two, whatever, you come back to it. Now, I don't know if anybody's come across this before, but how many times have you gone, this hat is making me crazy, I can't do a thing with it, it's terrible, and then you put it down, put it on the poupée, leave it for 1, 2, 3 days or a week or a month or a year, but maybe not that long, and then you come back and go, oh, that was actually not too bad. This is something that I think everybody who's a creative needs to be aware of. Sometimes you need to have a rest from your hat. Sometimes
you instantaneous perfection.
Thank you. Sometimes you need to sleep on it, and sometimes the mind, while you're asleep, comes back and goes, yeah, that can. And it's sometimes it's just, oh no, I'll just pin that there, and that's much better. Do you know what I mean? So I want to just give you that little thing to put up your sleeve because you might need it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.